welcome Matt Walsh.
Okay with that? Just had our first injury. All right, everyone. My name is Matt Walsh. What's your name?
Ken.
Just say it all at once. Don't do that. First time in Alaska, my wife and I, and it really is. It's unfair. You guys have such a beautiful state here, and for some reason we discovered that everywhere we go, maybe you could tell me what it is, but everywhere we go, people know that we're not from here because they'll say, "Oh, where are you from?" So what's giving us away? Is it I'm not masculine enough? Is that the problem? What is it? I think it's that we're very bundled up. We notice we can't, like you guys walk around in sweaters and it's negative 1,000 degrees outside. You're gonna get bronchitis. I'm really worried about all of you. All right, a couple things I want to accomplish today, and I noticed that you have those binders there, and I have my own page apparently, and there are lines for you to take notes, which I feel like there's a lot of pressure on me now because I have to be informative, which I wasn't planning on. But I do want to accomplish 4 things. The first is, of course, blabber long enough to successfully fill the 40-minute time allotment. But 2, more specifically, I want to give you a few ideas as to how you can use your platform, whatever it is, new media, social media, to spread the pro-life message. 3, I want to give you a few additional ideas as how you can reach out to what I call old media or mainstream media to engage them with the pro-life cause. And then 4, I plan to go off the rails at the end in an unrelated tangent. So it's an ambitious game plan, and I hope you're ready for it. Now, I suppose I should begin by telling you a little bit about myself, my favorite subject. I've been a blogger for about 2 years now. I started a website called the Matt Walsh Blog back in the fall of 2012, and when people ask me, I tell them that my site began as a hobby, and I never planned on it being a big deal. And I don't know why I say that because it's a lie. It's not. I'm a liar. It's not true. The truth is that I got into blogging fully expecting for it to become something significant and for it to become a platform where I could start a conversation. That's what I expected going in. And I didn't think it would play out exactly like it did, because you never know how things will play out in life. But that's what I expected. So just to give you some ideas about how I got to that point, I had already laid the groundwork before I published anything on the Matt Walsh blog. About a year before that, I built up a little bit of a following on Facebook, which is something that anyone can do. Nothing huge, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 people that would follow me just on my personal Facebook page. And I did that by just writing my thoughts about things as Facebook statuses, and I would post them and people would share them. And that was my launching pad, my springboard, once I started the website. Credit to my wife, by the way, who's here, because I was spending hours a day just on Facebook on top of my regular job as a radio host. And I was spending hours a day just writing Facebook status updates, and I would spend a lot of time crafting these. And I told her, this is work. I'm doing this for a reason. I'm not just playing around. And I think a lot of wives would say, "Oh, shut up, you're just messing around on Facebook, go take the garbage out." Which she did say that sometimes, but for the most part, she got it. She got it back way before there was really any reason to. So it turns out she's just as crazy as I am, which is a fortunate thing. So I kept building my little Facebook following until finally in November of 2012 I started the website, and it began modestly enough, of course, maybe a few hundred readers a week, enough to earn me a solid $12 or $13 through Google AdSense. But I kept writing, and during that time, in the early going, is when my wife gave birth to our twins. And still I dedicated a lot of time to this website that at the time was earning us enough money to maybe order Pizza Hut or something once a month. But by August of 2013, I had 1 million people a month coming to read what I was writing. That eventually grew to 1.5 million, 2 million, 3 million. And I had months where 5, 6, 7, 8 million people individually would come and read. And before the new year, I had one of the biggest blogs in the world. And I did this with long posts, very long, like War and Peace length by internet standards. And I didn't have any one single focus for what I was writing about. I leaned heavily on social and cultural issues, pro-life, pro-marriage. And so you'd have a 2,500 word post about abortion. And in other words, I was doing everything exactly the wrong way. Exactly the opposite of what they tell you you're supposed to do if you want to get an audience online. Now I've partnered with The Blaze, and my platform has grown even larger. It's been pretty incredible, and I have I've been reprinted on many major publications, and I have an army of dedicated trolls who spend a lot of time trying to figure out new ways to insult me, and it's been an incredible experience. And I suppose the reason why I'm here is I've learned a few things about the process, things that I think might be especially useful to you. Now, I know most of you probably don't have blogs. Are there any actual bloggers here? You guys? So that's 0 people. Okay, good. Well, I got nothing for you, so that's it. Good night, everybody. Well, whether you have one or not, the internet certainly provides us. Anyone use the internet here? Any internet users? Good, okay. Now we're connecting, finally. So whether you have a blog or not, the internet obviously provides us with this incredible and unique opportunity to reach people. And I mean, if you really think about it, it's a cliche, I know, but it's true. You carry around in your pocket a device that gives you access to everything. Billions of people, information, all of the recorded information in the history of mankind, and cats, lots of cats as well. All of the cumulative knowledge of the human race and cats, it's all in your pocket. So you think of the abolition movement during slavery times, for instance. You think of the challenges they faced just from a communication perspective. They had to educate people about the reality of slavery. They had to convince people to see the horror of it, convince them it was wrong, convince them to act. And how do they do it? I don't even know how they did it, frankly. They could write books, they could write newspaper articles, but who would see it? Who could read it? They could give speeches, but who would hear it? Many of the people in the country were isolated and illiterate. But now, in our abolition movement, it's as simple as pressing a button on the computer. And of course, the challenge is that everyone has the same capability, so you're in constant competition with the noise of millions of other people who are doing the exact same thing. But, the point is, if we can command the crowd's attention, if we can get them to shut up for just 2 minutes and take notice, we can change everything. The internet has the potential to transform our world for the better. There's a lot of negative potential that we're seeing play out, but it has a lot of positive potential as well, and I really believe that, and that's why I do this. So let me give you a few ideas through social media, through new media, as to how you can spread the pro-life message. You can use this tool for good, immense good, and I have 4 tips, 4 just basic tips on how you can do that. These are just 4 things to keep in mind if you want to defend the culture of life using the internet, which is something that we should all absolutely be doing. So number 1, here's the first tip. Completely abandon any worry that you might lose friends, and you might upset people, because you will upset people. You will lose friends. Ever since I started my website, I've had people I grew up with who won't speak to me anymore. Last time I met a group of friends from high school, and one of them wouldn't even shake my hand. And it's okay, we have too many friends anyway, most of us. You only need what, like 2 or 3? Enough to help you move, really, is what you need, so maybe 4. But something happened in our society, and I don't know what it is exactly. It probably has a lot to do with the collectivist mindset that is instilled by public schools and Hollywood and mass marketing, but the whole country went and lost its spine at some point recently. And we're so terrified now of making people angry or being unpopular. You know, we're terrified of being exposed as people with ideas and opinions and passions. And I can't tell you how often people will come up to me and almost like whispering, like there are spies hidden in the walls. Like, Matt, I really like your stuff. I can't share it, but it's good. I can't share it, but it's good stuff. I like it. And I say, well, why can't you share it? I say, well, people, they disagree. I say, I can't share it. I don't want to start an argument. But why not start an argument? Why not start a debate? This is America, isn't it? This is the whole point. We used to argue all the time in this country. It's called a discussion. It's called a debate. It's called a conversation. This is how conclusions are formed. This is how a consensus is drawn. This is how minds are changed. So absolutely, start an argument. I mean, babies are dying every day in this country, and we're worried about receiving a sternly worded comment on our Facebook profile. It's pathetic. And I get it. Some people are worried that not everyone. Some people have real jobs, unlike me, and you worry that, well, hey, if I write something on Facebook or Twitter about abortion, my boss might see it, and I might get fired. But you know what? If your employer tries to control your opinions outside of work even, then he's a tyrant. Maybe it's time to get a new job. So don't worry about upsetting people. That's the first point. The second point is, I know this sounds obvious, but it apparently isn't. The second point is this: make good arguments. Remember that the pro-life position has the advantage of being right. So it's really easy to make good arguments. Now, the reason why this isn't obvious is that we're often told these days that it's impossible to win an argument. You can't convince people. Which, if that's true, then what's the point of ever saying anything to anybody? That you can't convince people you're right through an intellectual argument. Of course, it's ridiculous. That's something that people who make bad arguments say. It is possible to logically and intellectually convince people to be pro-life, I believe. There are other dimensions to it, but I think that you can convince them through a logical argument. And if you do it and you do it well, you write something on Facebook or Twitter, it'll be shared, other people will see it. And it'll be shared particularly by people who recognize the good argument, but who lack the time or the ability to articulate it themselves. The most successful pro-life piece that I ever wrote was something where I addressed the pro-choice bodily autonomy argument, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. It's their favorite one these days, is bodily autonomy. And this is the idea that obviously we have ownership of our bodies, and any law that compels us to do one particular thing with our body is automatically wrong. Popular pro-choice argument, it might be their best one, actually. Of course, calling it the best pro-choice argument is sort of like saying that, chicken wings are the best thing to eat out of a dumpster, but it's the best thing they have. So I decided to write a post where I took the bodily autonomy justification and I just sort of dissected it 1,000 ways to Sunday. The idea is I want to take this, I want to just gut it and just destroy it and embarrass it. So I took several hours, and that's what I did. And I call it my most successful pro-life piece, not because it was the most widely read, though it was, but because it was one of those rare occasions where people emailed me afterwards and said, you changed my mind with that. And that's because, and I don't get any credit for that, it's right there. The pro-life is right. It's obviously right, so all you have to do is point it out. Good arguments are compelling. And when I encounter an argument that I disagree with, but I can't defeat, it ruins my day. It absolutely plagues me. I'll stew over it for hours. Now, I've never encountered this with abortion because no good argument for it exists, but with other things. So use your platform, whether it's social media or anything else, to introduce sound and rational arguments. It burns me up when I see pro-lifers making bad arguments because there's really no excuse for it. So the other day, I was just scrolling down my Facebook news feed, and I saw, and I've seen this a lot, but I saw a guy, he posted this. He said, why is it that all the people who are pro-choice have already been born? And yeah, that's true. I know it's a famous quote. It's Reagan, right? But that's the problem, it's a cliche, it's a bumper sticker slogan. And of all the arguments against abortion, that's the one you're going with? I mean, what a waste. What laziness. And the problem is with that argument, it's really easy to defeat. Pro-choice, especially as a man if you make that argument, you're walking right into it because the response from the pro-choicer is, oh yeah, well I've noticed that you're a man and you're pro-life and you've never been pregnant. Boom, gotcha. I mean, you just lost an argument against a pro-choicer. There's no excuse for that whatsoever. Number 3, don't beat around the bush. I'm not saying we should be vicious or spiteful. I'm saying that if you want to cut through the noise and get the internet's attention, get people to read and absorb your pro-life ideas, you can't worry about being politically correct or diplomatic. I think you just have to lay it out, be honest, pull no punches, shock people if you have to. I've noticed that a lot of pro-lifers these days, whether they're bloggers or anyone else, they pepper their message in this thick kind of mucusy layer of disclaimers and self-peddling, and because they want to anticipate every attack and anticipate every way that they'll be strawmanned and misinterpreted ahead of time and set out to defuse all those grenades before they get to their point. And the problem is that those intent on missing the point will. There's nothing you can do about that. And those who actually want to understand your point will just be bored by the time you finally tiptoe your way towards making it. So abortion is a horrible evil. It's the worst evil. A genocide, obviously, a slaughter of the innocent. And I don't think we should treat it like anything less than that. 4, emotion. I know I just got there saying that you should be frank and logical and get to the point and all that. That's true. But don't take that to mean that you should be emotionless or robotic or stiff. I would say be a human being, be emotional, be hopeful, be angry, yes, angry is okay, be desperate, be loving, just be real. Relate your own experiences, relate your own life, your own fears, your own feelings. I think you can do this and win the argument. In fact, I don't think you can win the argument unless you do it. The pro-life position is the human position, so we should all be human. This is another of the biggest mistakes that pro-lifers make, especially in the blogging and new media realm. I can't tell you how often I get emails from people sharing their, something that they wrote that they want to share online, asking for me to, asking for my opinion on it. And so often it comes across like an academic dissertation or like a book report. There's no life in it, which is kind of ironic. I mean, when I write a post about abortion or about anything, you try to be raw and real and emotionally invested. Because you want to get people's attention. You're not trying to impress a college professor or get an A on an exam. And that's pretty much it. Whether it's new media, social media, you approach it this way, and I think you're destined to connect with people. Of course, there are other things, having a sense of humor helps. Being current, being relevant, all that helps. But I think you can really have any style you want as long as you're bringing passion, truth, and reason to the table. I think in the pro-life movement, we get caught up a lot in debating styles and what's the right stylistic approach, and I think there's room for all of it. But we should bring these elements to the table. Now, I've also been asked about, to talk about how we can engage the media, the old media. And I'm in the media, I guess, to some extent, so I guess it makes sense that I was asked to talk about this. So I thought about it a lot. How can we get the media's attention as pro-lifers? And I came to one conclusion. This is what you want. This is what you can do if you want the media to pay attention to you. The first thing you could do is you could stop being pro-life. That's probably pretty much it. Because, frankly, it doesn't matter what strategy you employ or anything. If you're pro-life, they'll most likely ignore you. I live in Baltimore, Washington area. I've lived there most of my life. And down there we have, obviously, the March for Life every year in D.C. 500,000 people crowding the streets, right outside of the headquarters of all of these media companies. And there's not a news camera in sight most of the time. If 500,000 people can crowd the streets literally right outside of the building where these media companies are putting together their news reports and still be ignored, then what hope is there? And I think the hope is this, that we just forget the media altogether. We've had this problem for so long that we can't reach the masses without passing through the gatekeepers in old media. So we have to bring them their burnt offerings and sacrifice before their altar in hopes that they might find it in their hearts to acknowledge us. But I think those days are over now. Things are different. But of course they're asking me to give tips on how to engage the media, so I guess I can't just get up here and say, well, screw them, we don't need them. Write that down in your notes. Screw them, we don't need them. So I'll say this, the thing that makes the old media irrelevant is also the thing that can spur them to take up our cause, however reluctantly or unwillingly. I think, for example of Kermit Gosnell is a very good example of this. Now, if Gosnell had been doing those things, I don't have to get into what those things were, we're all familiar. If he'd been doing them 15 years ago, I mean, he was doing them 50, he did them for 30 years, but if he had been caught doing them 15 years ago, if he had been exposed at that time, I can all but guarantee that you would never have seen a single report about it on any national news program anywhere, or any local news program. As it happened, though, the issue was ignored at first. You know, they tried to ignore it, didn't they? This was a serial killer of infants. I mean, all abortion doctors, of course, serial killers of infants, but this one was murdering infants outside of the womb, leaving their dead bodies in the refrigerator. He was a psychopath. And you know the story. He segregated his waiting rooms between black and white, poor and rich, gave worse treatment to poor minorities, killed a few of them. Blood drenched the walls. Dead bodies in the corner of the room in buckets. And it all went on with the tacit approval of the government agencies who knew what was going on and did nothing. I mean, this is a huge story, huge. And the old media tried to let the story slip under the radar. But fortunately, these are different times. It's ain't 1993 anymore. So, pro-lifers on social media and in new media, they sounded the alarm. This was early in my blogging days, but I hit this story pretty hard like every other pro-lifer did on the internet. Took to Facebook, we took to Twitter, talked about it on our YouTube channels, podcasts, whatever. We brought the message to the masses and we exposed the media's attempt to cover it up. And what happened? Eventually, you started seeing reports on the nightly news about it. They discussed it on cable news channels. They didn't give it the treatment it deserved, obviously, but we did force them to talk about it. And most of them did. One of them, I think it was CBS, even asked the president about it. Of course, he's a spineless weasel, so he dodged it. Too cowardly to so much as condemn the mass murder of infants, but he was asked. And that's more than what would have happened even a decade ago. So I think the Gosnell case was a seminal moment in some ways because he was an abortionist murdering infants and women, specifically targeting minorities, ignoring health and safety standards, and allowed to go on unimpeded for decades. This was the last story that the old media would ever want to report on, but they were forced to acknowledge it. They still didn't give it the attention it deserved, yes, but they were forced to acknowledge it. And that's something that we did, you know. And what do we learn from it? I think a few things. The first is that we should try to organize around specific stories. In Gosnell's case, yes, he wasn't actually substantively worse than any other abortionist. He just had some stylistic and aesthetic differences from them, but we seized on that particular case. And we put it out there on social media, through other internet channels, and we hammered it home. And eventually the story became the media's treatment of the story. And then after a while, the story became the story itself. Because we were consistent and specific. Consistent and specific, I think, is very important. Of course, the media is never going to report, breaking news, abortion is bad. That's never going to happen. But if we take one egregious example from one clinic and spread it all over the internet, all over the world with consistency and specificity, then we create the headline ourselves. And that's the second thing we learned. New media and social media direct old media, not the other way around. We decide what's important. Another example, last year it was reported that a power plant in Oregon had been incinerating dead babies, medical waste they called it, to power homes in the Northwest. So these were homes being powered in part by the bodies of dead children. Again, not the kind of news that CNN would usually gravitate towards. But pro-life bloggers, and people on social media, we made hay with that story, sent it viral. Pro-lifers were, with Facebook and Twitter accounts, alerted their friends and followers. And eventually you started seeing some reporting from mainstream sources, and that power plant was forced to abandon the practice. Again, they didn't report it with the intensity they should have, but they did report it. They had to. We forced them. And that's the power that we have as pro-lifers in the internet age. So, I guess, how do you engage with the media? You just push them around. You show them who's boss. We decide what's important, not you. That's what we tell them. Okay, what's next on the agenda? Yeah, go off the rails at the end. Okay, so we're at that part now. I think it's important to emphasize that we can talk about how to use our platforms, our social media, to spread the pro-life message. We can talk about how to do that. But I don't think we should take that as an indication that we have a choice necessarily. God has given us this tool to speak the truth about the slaughter of innocent children, and so we must. I don't think it's an option. I think if you have a Facebook account and you're not using it to expose the murder of children, if you're using it exclusively for anything else, then you're doing something wrong. I'm chastised anytime I write about abortion. Castigated, threatened, mocked, insulted, boo-hoo. And sometimes people will come up to me and they'll say, Matt, it must take a lot of courage to put all that out there, to talk about an issue like this. It must take courage. And I always think, courage? What am I actually risking? We're not risking much in this country when it comes to standing up for what's right. We're not putting our lives on the line. So courage? No, not in the slightest. I'm not going above and beyond. When I defend life with my platform, I'm only doing exactly what I should be doing. If I did anything less, if I had this platform and I didn't use it on occasion to expose the murder of children, then I would be an unforgivable, shameless, despicable wuss. That's what I would be. If I had millions of people reading my words and it was my job to write about the issues of the day, and I didn't mention every once in a while that, hey, by the way, 1 million babies are being slaughtered in this country every year. If I didn't do that, I would be just the smallest, weakest, most frivolous, wimpish little punk you've ever laid eyes on. And yes, that's pretty much what I think of a lot of conservative bloggers who do not touch this issue. They're pretty much worthless. A blog post about abortion, that's the least we can do. A Facebook post about abortion, least we can do. People will get angry, they'll call you names, who knows. But does that make you courageous? No, it doesn't. And I would say if you, sitting out there today, if you champion the pro-life cause through whatever channels you have, does that make you courageous or heroic? No. That alone does not make you courageous. It means you're doing exactly what you should be doing. It's just default. You're doing what you have to do. I'm reminded of a story that made the news just last, I think it was last week, and there's security, it was a security camera footage that was released online of a teenager named Jamal Rutledge being booked into a jail in Fort Lauderdale. And the footage shows that this officer is, booking the guy into jail. I'm not sure what he did. And the police officer has a heart attack, and he collapses onto the ground, and he's writhing there on the ground having a heart attack. And the teenager is in handcuffs, sitting, 10 feet away. And so Jamal gets up and, he walks over to the officer, looks around, and walks back to his seat, like he's about to sit down, thinks better of it. And then he walks over to the glass door, and there are people on the other side of the glass door, just a few feet away, and he kind of kicks on it, and he's like, like that. Hey, there's a guy in here dying. And so other officers rush in and help the police officer. Now, the reason why I'm bringing that up is that the way that the media handled this, if you saw headlines about this little human interest story, you know, they told us that he acted courageously and that he was brave. In fact, one article I saw about this incident had the title, "Handcuffed Teen Bravely Reacts When Booking Officer Collapses from Heart Attack." Bravely reacts. Bravely. No, he just reacted. He reacted like any halfway decent human being would. What else could he have done that wouldn't have been a form of manslaughter at that point? The handcuffed teen bravely decides not to be guilty of negligent homicide, is essentially the headline. So am I raining on this kid's parade? Yeah, I guess I am. Because when we lower the bar for bravery and courage all the way down to the point where you can crawl and still get over it, we undermine true courage, and we create an environment where people are not inspired to really go above and beyond. When meeting expectations becomes cause for celebration, then fewer people will do anything more than that, and more will do significantly less. But now you turn the lights on for me, thanks. No, put them back on. I'm hideous. Turn them back off. I think that's the danger of events, sometimes of pro-life events, frankly. They're designed to mobilize, inspire, inform, and raise awareness. All very noble intentions, very purposeful. But sometimes, if you're not careful, they turn into a big old self-congratulatory pat on the back. I've been to a fair amount of them, whether they're pro-life or other conservative causes, and every single speaker just gets up and does nothing but talk about how awesome everyone is and how heroic we are. And they all leave the stage to thunderous applause. Now, that hasn't been the case. I don't think that's going to be the case today. But I think we need to be careful. We need to be sure that it doesn't turn into that. We need to guard our hearts and our ego. We need to realize that speaking out for life, speaking out to defend innocent babies who are slaughtered, that's just exactly what we must do. It's the equivalent of kicking on a glass door to let people in the other room know that someone in here is having a heart attack. It's really nothing. It's what every human being, it's ground floor, it's point A. It's the very first step. So being pro-life, I think that's just a given. Maybe it isn't in the culture of death, but we don't live on the culture's terms. So I would say we stand up for life because it's our duty, because that's the only real choice we have, because the other option is too horrifying and ugly to even consider. And if we want to talk about courage, you know, what is courage? I think courage is not writing a blog post or a Facebook post, getting up early on a Saturday morning, stand outside of an abortion clinic, counseling these women, praying for them. That's courageous. Putting yourself out there, volunteering at a crisis pregnancy center, that's courageous. Realizing that the culture of death, which gives birth to this unholy satanic sacrament called abortion, that it's perpetuated by a lifestyle of lust and porn and drunkenness and then rejecting all those temptations because of it, and distancing ourselves from friends who try to pull us towards it, fundamentally living a clean and chaste, pure life, one that serves as a light to all. I think that's courageous. To act, to sacrifice, to go to extremes, I think to turn being pro-life into more than a political position or a rally or a march or a pamphlet or a bumper sticker or a blog post or a Facebook post, but to make it into our very existence, to embody it. I think that is courage. And so for those of us who just say pro-life things and we take pro-life positions, argue pro-life points, but if we don't live it, if we haven't allowed it, the title of pro-life, to reach below the skin and become ingrained in our very soul, to those of us in that camp, I think it's time that we take the next step to be courageous and be brave and become martyrs for the cause. Not a martyr in the sense that we're going out and getting ourselves physically killed, but a martyr because our old self, our secular kind of just going along to get along self, dies. We acknowledge that we're in a spiritual war, and we dedicate ourselves to it. So I think we've made a lot of progress in the pro-life movement. but it's been 40 years now of babies being killed. So we haven't made enough progress. I am absolutely not satisfied with where we are. I am not impressed with anything that we've done so far, because these babies are still dying. So I think it's time for all of us to take the next step. And I think the next step starts within ourselves. And it starts with us really being heroes. I said it'd be irrelevant at the end of the blogging thing, and it was. That's it for me. Thanks a lot, guys. Oh, yeah.
Matt's going to take some questions if you have anything that you want to ask.
Somebody better have a question. It's going to be embarrassing otherwise. Anybody have a question? Just throw me a bone. Just say, I don't even care. What's my favorite color? Yeah, in the middle. Well, I know it would be helpful if I could answer that question, but I'm just being honest that I really don't think there is. Because when it comes down to it, the people that are putting these reports together hate your guts, for the most part. And so, what can you do? I mean, if you go out and commit violence in the name of the pro-life cause, then you'll get some coverage then. That's what they're looking for, you know. Obviously, I'm not encouraging that, by the way. Someone's going to take that last clip out of context and put it on YouTube. But if we are, as pro-lifers always do, you know, protesting peacefully, I think we're always going to be ignored. But the good thing is that I don't really think it matters anymore. What difference does it make, frankly, if your local news station in Fairbanks covers your pro-life cause? Who cares? I mean, the pro-life movement, this is one thing that obviously everyone here knows, but outside of the pro-life movement, people don't understand. It is, by and large, a youth movement. It's got a lot of youth, and the youth, the older folks started it, you know, and now they're passing the baton to the younger generation, and we're taking it, and we don't care about the news anyway. We don't watch it. You know, Fox News, what's the average viewer age? It's like 87 is so we're not even watching. We are on social media, we're on the internet, and the great thing is that we don't have to go through any gatekeeper to get there. We just put it out there, and I think if you look at, you know, pro-lifers who are under the age of 35, and you ask them, how do they stay informed? Or even, how do they get into the pro-life cause? They're going to tell you, well, it was through the internet. What time's it on? 6? No, they're better. They're like Wheel of Fortune's on at that time, isn't it? No, I don't think it's worth watching. I mean, I guess, you know, outside of ideological things, you know, your local evening news will tell you about some things going on locally that could be important. So maybe for that reason, but certainly not the national evening news. So I don't know why. I don't know how you know, this whole thing with Brian Williams. You guys heard about that, right? It's pretty hilarious. Anyway, the guy's a liar, obviously. But I was reading reports about this story about Brian Williams, and they were showing his numbers on how many people watch, and I'm like, who is sitting down to watch the national network evening news anymore? It's certainly not as many as used to. Yeah, I would say, well, how many, if you don't mind sharing, I don't want to get too personal, but how many followers do you have?
Well, friends, 700.
Okay. Yeah, I would say definitely stay on the, when you try to move, sometimes when you try to move over into an actual page rather than a profile, you can start to lose people. It doesn't feel as personal to people. And also the way the Facebook, now I'm going to get really specific, but the way the Facebook algorithm works, it's making it really difficult for Facebook pages, like fan pages and political pages, to get to the top of news feeds. And they're really emphasizing the personal pages now. Now I'm experiencing this where it's really, even though I have, you know, almost 300,000 followers, it's really hard for me to access them because of the way Facebook has put their algorithm together. So I would say definitely stay on your personal profile page. Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I should have covered that originally, shouldn't I? Well, I think the thing that I do that I guess most people would recommend, but And sometimes I forget that other people, have a life and I don't. So I just assume that everyone spends time reading, feminist, pro-choice literature, and which is what I do, to try to understand, okay, what are they saying? What are the points that they're making? And I think that's what you have to start. You have to understand the enemy, so to speak. And they are the enemy. As long as they advocate for the murder of children, they are the enemy. And so you have to understand. That's how I came to understand that. That's one problem, as you know, with liberal ideology in general, is that it's hard to keep up with it because it's always moving. They have their one argument and it's bad, and then they just move to the next and they redefine terms, and so you have to kind of keep up with it. And that's when I realized that the bodily autonomy argument is, the pro-choicers, from what I've found, have sort of moved beyond, well, is it a human being? Is it a person? Is it a life? I don't think they care about that anymore. They'll acknowledge that, yes, it is. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it's a life. It's a person. Call it whatever you want to call it. They don't care. What they've moved on to is, hey, it's my body, and I have control over my body. I have bodily autonomy. And so I think to read the other arguments, read the rationale they give for it, and then it's easy from there to point out the flaws, to point out the inconsistencies because they're never consistent, to point out the hypocrisies. That's one of my favorite things to do is, they propose this principle and they'll say, we have a right over our body, nobody can tell us what to do. And then you say, okay, well, how far does that extend? Because you're advocating it as a universal principle, but would you apply it over here and here and here and here? And the answer is no, they wouldn't. And so you've already started to weaken it, and you've shown that it's not a universal principle. And because it's not universal, then it's contextual. And why is it only in this context that we have autonomy over our bodies? And I think they have difficulty following the logic from there. So, but probably before reading what pro-choicers are saying, I think that the first thing to do is read what intelligent pro-lifers are saying as well, of course. And I'm not including, not me, but the smarter people out there. Yeah, well, it could go on. I've seen Facebook arguments, even on my page, that go on for like 6 months. It just never ends. But I think, in my mind, the argument is over once you have backed your opponent into a corner where they have to assert something ridiculous. Now, it's hard to tell when that point is because with pro-choicers, everything is ridiculous. Thank you. But like I was talking about before, the exercise where you take their principles and you say, well, how far does it extend? Would you apply it here, here, and here? And once you get them to the point where they're saying, yeah, it applies over here in this really ridiculous situation, and you know they don't mean it, then I think you sort of won at that point. So, but no, at least for me, if I'm reading an argument, I don't necessarily think, well, the person with the last word won. I think it's important to stay calm, to not devolve into insults and everything, right. To stay rational, and then you win. And then you win that way, I think. Don't use emoticons or exclamation points, please. It's the worst. You're talking about it, with a miscarriage. If somebody goes through that and they want to, hold their child, and there's a picture taken, I think it's a very sad picture, tragic, beautiful in some ways. So I don't think there's anything. I don't think there's an inappropriate time for something like that, personally. Now, if you're talking about the graphic images of abortions and mangled, dismembered babies, I think there's a time and a place for it. That's what I said. I was saying a few minutes ago that I think we get caught up in pro-lifers. We get caught up in, well, this is the exact right way to position the pro-life argument. And I don't think there is one right way to do it. I think there's a place for the pictures. Personally, I have written a lot on abortion. I've only included pictures of aborted babies one time because I thought it was the right time for it. And I was responding, I think if I remember correctly, you may remember maybe back in the summer, there was a woman who filmed herself getting an abortion, and they didn't show the actual procedure, but they kind of showed her going into the clinic, and they showed her lying on the table, and she was sort of smiling and giggling, and you know, she's this sort of young, attractive, blonde woman, and it's almost like she's acting like she's going in to get her wisdom teeth removed. And pro-choicers took this, and they put this video all over the place. They say, look, proof that abortion isn't scary. See, it's proof, because this woman is smiling while she gets one, so that's proof. And so I thought, okay, well, now is time to respond to that, because they're trying to dress up abortion in these pretty funny images. And so now is the time to say, well, you know what, there was something else happening. They showed her face, but there was something else going on. This is the full picture, here it is. And so I think there is a place for that, personally. Whether we should, you know, every day be putting these mangled images on our Facebook, I would say no, because I think we should be utilizing different strategies, and we shouldn't rely too heavily on that. I think we should be very specific about when we do it. And I can see how, you know, maybe the very young, you know, if I had my children will be aware of abortion from a young age, but at the age of 4, I'm not going to be showing them those images. It's too young, you know. You want them to hang on to their innocence, as long as they can anyway, so. But that's my opinion on it. Yep, we're done, okay. You guys have nothing?